What Really Happened radio show. The history the government hopes you never learn. Here is your host, Michael Rivero.
And aloha, America. Welcome to our show. It's Friday, September 27th, 2013 here. Thank goodness it's Friday. Thank goodness it's Friday. Thank goodness it's Friday. And I realize the people on Bambuser are not going to hear this, but just in case people are asking what's going on here, I upgraded my Bambuser video to the paid professional feed to try and improve bandwidth. And apparently the free service would no longer work with whatever it is they're doing. They just merged with somebody over at Sony and everything. And today the Bambuser, despite my having paid $124 per month for the advanced service, it's not working at all. So there's no Bambuser TV show today, and I apologize for that. It's just, you know, life under fascism. The more you pay, the less you actually get. Speaking of the more you pay, the less you actually get, the IPCC did, in fact, release their final version of their climate report today, and as we all knew was going to happen, the part in the preliminary report that admitted there'd been no warming at all for 15 years was deleted, and all over the corporate media they're saying, yes, this report says there's still global warming, and we're 95% sure it's all the fault of you humans. So they're back to pushing global warming and carbon credits and carbon taxes as hard as they can. Now, I don't know if the carbon Nazis are just listening to their greed and ego, or if they really think the human race is that stupid and gullible, or they're merely reinforcing this official lie because they have to reinforce them all. If they back off and admit, yeah, we were wrong about global warming, then all of a sudden the people of the world say, all right, what else were you wrong about? Saddam's nuclear weapons? Certainly. Assad gassing his own Alawite supporters? Yeah, probably. So they're out there just pushing this thing as hard as they can. And it's kind of absurd because what they're effectively saying in that preliminary report, where they admitted there was actually no warming, is they said they don't know why the planet isn't warming, but they know for sure why it would be warming if it was warming, and it's all your fault. So buy your carbon credits, pay your carbon taxes. Raising on a busted flush. You know, humans, the report is actually saying humans are the dominant cause of global warming, meaning you, the people of planet Earth, are more powerful than the sun and more powerful than the changing shape of the Earth's orbit. It's all your fault. Okay, well, what about all the other climate swings throughout the history of the Earth? The ice ages followed by the interglacials. There were no humans back then melting the glaciers. So they're trying to still hide the embarrassing fact there's been no warming on planet Earth for the last 15 years. Now, one would think that if stopping global warming were the real agenda, the governments and institutions who'd signed on to this global warming screed would proclaim the data openly. There's no more warming. We succeeded. We are victorious. And then move on to other projects. But the real agenda all along has been to trick you, the public, into buying carbon credits, from which Al Gore profits handsomely, and carbon taxes, which Obama is still pushing for, which is why the failure of the real world to match the draconian predictions of the global warming cult is being concealed from you. And this proves this whole global warming issue is about politics and money, not science. Now, coming from a science background myself, I value the scientific method for discerning the truth, but I also understand individual scientists are just as corruptible as individual politicians and individual clergy. And just as the witch hunters in the Middle Ages who were paid to find witches saw witches everywhere they looked, so too scientists paid to find human-caused global warming see human-caused global warming everywhere they look. This has led to massive fraud, from placing temperature measuring stations next to trash incinerators, to those emails and computer codes leaked from the Hadley Climate Research Unit that proved intentional deception to hide the decline. And this latest IPCC report continues that fraud. If at first you don't succeed, lie again. Now, over at the BBC, they were going on and on about how many thousands of scientists have signed their name to this thing. And I don't care how many scientists traded their honor for global warming funding. Science is not a democracy where the majority rules. Michael Crichton used to say, if it's consensus, it isn't science. And if it's science, it isn't consensus. And remember, back in 1633, virtually every scientist was in agreement that Galileo was wrong when he concluded the Earth moved around the sun. They were motivated by peer pressure, pressure from the church, fear of losing their jobs in the universities, and all the scientists went along with the popular agenda, and history eventually showed they were all, down to the last man, flat out wrong. So trust scientific method, but never trust individual scientists. There's the golden rule of science. Whoever's handing out the gold decides what the science is going to be. And you need to understand, scientists have ego and vanity just like anybody else. And scientists understand that if they come out with a report that says, I found this interesting phenomenon, but it doesn't really seem to do anything, there'll be no more funding and no media attention. But if they come out and say, I found this phenomenon and it's potentially the end of the world, media attention will skyrocket, followed by more funding to study the problem and look for solutions. And from this very simple economic mechanism, we got stories about killer bees, computers locking up on Y2K, catastrophic global warming in 1817, catastrophic global warming in 1922, catastrophic global warming in 1947, a coming ice age in 1975, and back to catastrophic global warming in the 2000s. Now, back in 2000, the UK Independent had a banner headline, snowfalls are now just a thing of the past. We've had several record winters since, and right now, this very moment, there is a major snowstorm hitting Wyoming, shutting down the highways. So BBC and IPCC can scream global warming all they want to justify the theft from the people under the rubric of we're saving the world. But the public are going to simply look out their doors and windows in the coming months, and it looks to be a very harsh winter because solar activity is at a 100-year low. And they're going to realize that human-caused global warming is no more real than Saddam's nuclear weapons. We're going to grab a quick phone call here. Fred, Michigan. Aloha, Fred. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Oh, Mike, you've really sparked my memory here. Okay, so global warming, right? Lord Monckton. Have you ever interviewed Lord Monckton?
I'd like to get him on the show. I've certainly read his work and linked to it, but no, I've not had the privilege of speaking with him yet.
Now, he does have a website, doesn't he? Is it sppi.org?
Something like that, yeah.
Science and Public Policy Institute.org. I heard an interview. I wondered what happened with him. Then I heard an interview with, I forgot who interviewed him, but anyway, they're making stellar headway in combating, neutralizing this climatocracy, hypocrisy, especially in places like Australia and England. He mentioned a couple particular legal actions that have, the new Prime Minister of Australia by the name of Abbott,
yeah,
he has shut down, he has totally defunded, shut down the entire apparatus in Australia.
Oh, a lot of governments have already done that. I mean, a lot of local, state, province governments were tailoring their spending based on the predictions of warming. And as a result, they were like not well prepared for these rough winters that came in, and they got slammed for it. So.
Oh, and the other thing, Mike, Assad of Syria, I learned this week he had banned all GMO frankenfood from his country. Now. And he's I think, an English-trained physician. Why would this guy then gas his own people?
Well, let's get back to the global warming thing. The head of the IPCC that's putting this out, do you know what his previous job was? He drove trains for a living. We'll be right back after these commercials. Aloha, America. Welcome back to the show here. And we're still trying to sort out if Bambuser is in fact doing a live broadcast or replaying something previous. It's just kind of really messed up over there. Kyle in Philadelphia is still on the line, but before I go back to him, I am getting emails from people saying that there's snow falling right now in New Mexico. And maybe the reason the IPCC decided to do a full court press on global warming is they know we're heading into a hard winter. Because I'm sure they understand that solar output really does control climate. And solar output, solar activity rather, is at a 100-year low. It's looking like a new Maunder minimum. And all these government agencies and universities and educational, I use the term loosely, television, have bet their reputations going along with Al Gore and global warming. And they can't back up and say we were wrong. They have to maintain the illusion of infallibility. Alrighty, so Kyle, did you have something else you wanted to add?
Yeah, well, the IPCC, Al Gore, and all of these climate scientists, all their information is based on computer models, theoretical applications of them.
Yes.
When in fact, we have had a practical application in the past 5 years. And that is, I've said it before, in 2010, there was an Icelandic volcano that erupted for 25 days. And for 10 of those days, this volcano spit more ash and more CO2 into the atmosphere, so much that it stopped planes from flying from England to New York because they couldn't have a clear path. This volcano pumped more CO2 into the atmosphere in the course of 10 days than humanity has during the course of human history. From the time the automobile was made to today to all other forms of CO2, this one single volcano puts more CO2 into the atmosphere.
We've got a volcano on that island over there that's been erupting continuously for almost 20 years now. And it does put out huge amounts of carbon dioxide. But the global warming cult, the carbonazis, you know, what they say is they acknowledge that human contribution to CO2 is just a tiny fraction of the CO2 in the atmosphere. But their claim is that all of that other CO2 from volcanoes and from decaying plant matter and so forth is... And the ocean, they say, you know, that's natural CO2 and nature is already taking care of that, but this tiny, tiny fraction of 1% humans are contributing is throwing the system out of balance. That's their entire claim here. Now, the reality is that this idea of a balance of nature is a very romantic notion, but it doesn't exist. Nature is chaos. Nature is change. Nature is careening down the corridors of time, banging off the walls, with new life forms emerging and old life forms going extinct. There really is no balance of nature. That's why it's always changing. That's why climate is always changing. There is no natural stability at all. But I'm sorry. But like I said, the reason they chose to demonize carbon dioxide, and even the EPA is now saying it's a dangerous pollutant. No, it isn't. It is essential for the cycle of life on this planet. But they targeted CO2 because that one they could drop as the fault of humans in order to guilt them out of taxes.
Well, they picked CO2 because they can hit it on humans, but also it allows them to collect large amounts of money and not really have to offer any solution, not have to do anything. All they have to do is adjust their theoretical models and say, hey, whoa, we fixed the problem. Your tax dollars at work.
You're absolutely right. You're absolutely right. The carbon credit is the only commodity being bought and sold on the commodity market that promises not to deliver anything. I mean, that's how bogus this whole situation is.
All they need to do is fix the code. All they need to do is go back to and say, oh, you know, whew, thank God you donated all that money. Now we're all good.
Yeah, that's exactly right. You know, they've created this threat out of thin air, and when they've got enough money, they'll say, oh, wow, the threat is gone. See, we delivered here. And
all right, Mike, well, have a great weekend. I'll let you go, buddy.
All right, thanks an awful lot. Now, before today's release of the IPCC report, which did delete the section that admits Earth has not warmed for 15 years. We were already starting to see the climate scientists and everything sort of back off and try and deal with the reality that there was going to be an admission there was no warming for the last 15 years. But as Der Spiegel confirmed, the government of Germany was pressuring the IPCC to delete that information. The government of the United States was. Hungary was out there saying, if you admit there's no warming, it's only going to fuel those gosh darn climate deniers. But we have this weird story that was over in the Express in Great Britain, in which now they're trying to say that the failure of the world to warm the way it was forecast was really just an innocent computer error. And Lord Lawson is ordering the Met Office to review their computer code to see why it didn't match up. But again, those computer simulations had limited context. They did not include all the possible factors on climate. They were set up to say, if nothing else is changing, what is the impact of humans? And they got a result that was consistent with what they were trying to prove. And they're not interested in any alternate views of what's going on. We've had some of these people come out and absolutely say the sun has no control over Earth's climate. Really, if the sun turned off tomorrow, do you think the Earth would not freeze immediately? Of course the sun is controlling climate. And then a lot of this goes all the way back to that data on Viking, because when Viking was on Mars, well, it's still there actually, it's just not working anymore, and the subsequent probes, they were looking at increases and decreases in the Martian temperature, and they were lining up with increases and decreases of the temperature on Earth. Now, there are no icky-poo humans pouring out carbon dioxide on Mars. The only common factor between the surface of Mars and the surface of Earth is solar radiation. So now they're trying to back off and say, oh, it was a flaw in our computer model, but trust us, we're still doing the right thing. In fact, there was another article that was out there where they were actually saying, well, even though the world isn't warming, we still believe these carbon control policies are important to maintain for the children. Anyway, remember that video where Obama was up there speaking to Congress and he started going on about overwhelming scientific evidence on climate change, and the Congress laughed at him? We have that on the front page of whatreallyhappened.com. So we're already seeing the inevitable polling coming out there. Do you believe in global warming? They had one over at the Journal, which is running about neck and neck with about 45% believing in global warming and the other 45% saying no. But the question is misleading because it's actually a two-part question. One, do you think the world is getting warmer? And if you agree with that, then you ask the question, do you think humans are entirely to blame for that? And I ran my own poll at whatreallyhappened.com. Do you think humans are causing global warming? And we got 86% no as of the last time I was checking on that. They haven't proven the world is getting warmer. And until they do that, they can't even begin to look for what is the cause of the problem. Pop quiz. How many active volcanoes and thermal vents are there on the floor of the Earth's oceans? And don't feel embarrassed if you don't know. It's a trick question. Nobody knows. And until you know how many active thermal vents and active volcanoes are on the floor of the world's oceans pouring heat into the water, you can't make a declaration about humans are causing this temperature increase in the ocean. This is politics. This is a scam for money and power. It's not real. It's not real at all. And and this is not the first time we've seen this. The scammers love to find something that happens naturally. It's part of nature, and they declare it a crisis and an emergency. And then they sell you a solution. It's called the Hegelian dialectic. It's how you control people. You get up there on TV and you say, there are space aliens coming to invade us. But if you will agree to increase taxes and doing as you're told, we will set up a space-based defense system to keep those aliens away from us. It really is that absurd. And it was that absurd with human-caused global warming. There was a bit of a warming trend in the 1990s, and everybody said, okay, we'll use this. We'll take this warming trend, declare it a pending disaster, and we'll get money and obedience out of the people. And then, of course, Mother Nature basically gave Al Gore and his friends the bird, and the temperatures started dropping down. That's where that whole hide the decline thing came from. It's not science. It's politics. It's fraud, it's hoax, it's propaganda. And they're back out there with this new IPCC report, which we already know deleted the admission that there's been no warming, to try and say, yes, there's global warming, it's your fault, and you will atone by giving us your money. We'll be right back. Aloha, America. Welcome back to the show here. And a listener wrote in to say, of course global warming is caused by humans. Those are humans rigging the data and rigging the computer codes. We have some very intelligent, clever listeners to the show. All right, back to the phones. Jim in Georgia. Aloha, Jim. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Aloha, Michael. I've got a few things to tell. I've been working outside for 58 years. I'm older than that. You know that. I've noticed in the past 3 years our weather used to come, if it rained in Albuquerque where my sister lived, 3 days later we'd get it in Georgia. Well, it doesn't work that way anymore. Now it goes up to the Midwest and then up to the Great Lakes. Our rain this year, we're 17 inches over normal. It comes from the Gulf of Mexico. I've noticed hurricanes, and since I've lived here about every 20 years, it's 75, 95, 205, 215. Then we need to worry about hurricanes in Georgia, Mississippi, and Alabama. But as far as the Great Lakes, they haven't froze over in a great many years. I have family that lives in Buffalo. They're going to have a bad weather this year. They're going to have the most snow, like you said, on the radio.
Yeah, because the solar activity is at a 100-year low, and even CERN confirmed that when solar activity declines, you get more cosmic rays reaching the surface of the Earth. Cosmic rays stimulate cloud formation. More clouds means more sunlight reflects back out into space, cooling the Earth underneath. And even that report from CERN, the section where this had implications for the whole global warming debate, was deleted under political pressure. So these people know the science. These people. I'm sorry. These people know the science is not supporting their claims, and that's why they're going out there and using political pressure to get CERN to drop the implications of their research into solar activity. They're pressuring the IPCC to take out the part where they're acknowledging there has been no warming for 15 years. And we're heading into a major, major winter. I mean, Arctic ice extent is 67% over what it was this time last year. And it's going to be a brutal, brutal winter. And they're still out there pushing this whole global warming, and it's your fault, and we need your carbon taxes, and you've got to buy carbon credits.
Right. Well, I've noticed the jet stream has changed. Like I say, it used to come from New Mexico to Georgia in 3 days, the rain, but it's gone to the Midwest and up north. So they're going to get clobbered this year, and the Great Lakes will Lake Erie didn't overfreeze. Many years it's going to. So
I'm anticipating when the jet stream shifts over the Pacific, we're probably going to get some really spectacular storms here in the Hawaiian Islands. We're going to let you go, Jim. Thank you very much. I'm going to switch over to Fred in Michigan. Aloha, Fred. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Mike, hey, Michio Kaku has gone on record stating on his program, and this is in contravention to what Bob Tuskin's guess. He's had an Australian scientist on, John, rather brilliant fellow, and then a lady by the name of Lauren Moray. She would make an excellent interview. Well, anyway, Fukushima is looming as a colossal disaster for the Pacific Ocean and all of the terrestrial inhabitants of North America. They, even though Kaku says that the solution to pollution is dilution. He's got a mantra. The solution to pollution is dilution concerning Fukushima. And yet, Huskin's guess, Australian John, I'll say, and Lauren Moray, who's absolutely brilliant, are totally blowing that out of the water, because they said, look, when the marine algae become debilitated and are unable to because of all of that radioactive waste, it was something like 400 tons already, if I remember correctly.
Yeah, well, nobody's really sure. I mean, it's now coming out. They've been lying about the amounts of radiation going back all the way to the actual destruction of the power plant here, and we can't trust what they're putting out there. I remember one time where they were admitting to this huge amount of radiation coming out. Then 24 hours later, they had dropped the number down by a factor of 10 and said, oh, it was just a calculator mistake, nothing to worry about, nothing to worry about. And then several months later, we find out the original high number had, in fact, been accurate. Now they're finally getting around to admitting that, yes, when Reactor 3 exploded, it wasn't a hydrogen explosion, like they tried to claim at the time. There was a low-order nuclear detonation in that reactor. And when it all happened, I pointed out that if it was a hydrogen explosions produce steam, which is white, and that plume rising up over the reactor number 3 was this pale, sickly green, which happens to be the color of the quadrivalent form of plutonium oxide. So we knew they were lying all the way back then. Now, the reason that they're putting all this thing about carbon dioxide and global warming is they think they can get money from all the citizens of the world to solve a non-existent problem. They're downplaying Fukushima because there isn't anything they can do about it, and the people outside of Japan are going to say, we're not going to pay taxes to fix that problem. That's Japan's problem. That's TEPCO's problem. That's General Electric's problem. Same thing with the Gulf of Mexico. They can't actually fix that. And people aren't going to be willing to pay Corexit taxes to correct a problem that was brought about by recklessness and malfeasance by British Petroleum and the owners of the Deepwater Horizon. The equipment wasn't being maintained, and ultimately it was a failure of the United States government, because in virtually every other nation that does undersea drilling for oil, these acoustic automatic blowout preventers are mandated pieces of equipment, and they are not required in the Gulf of Mexico. And that would have prevented that disaster from happening. But they cost $500,000 each. And, well, boy, when you've got 4,000 wells in the Gulf of Mexico, look, that's really too much money to spend. It's going to make our stockholders very, very unhappy. Okay, Fred? I guess we lost Fred. We're going to switch over to Scott in Wisconsin. Aloha, Scott. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Good. How you doing there, Michael? I just wanted to call in and talk to you about this private insurance that I found out in our local newspaper the other day. Wife come home and told me there was 400,000 Wisconsinites that are uninsured right now, and if this Obamacare goes through, they're going to shred private 90,000 Badger Care insurance people. And Michael, I made a list of what you've been talking about for the last, so we can get people across America waked up to some of these. And if I could name them off, I got 10 of them.
Oh, just real quick, we've only got 2 minutes.
Okay, shredder, big corporation, destroyed, housing shredded, house swaps, Freddie Mae and Freddie Mac, car shops shredded through the car swaps, Medicaid, Medicare, shredded. Destroyed small businesses, shredded. Private insurance, shedding right now. Private farmers, shredded and destroyed. College loans, shredded and destroyed. 401k and savings, shredded and destroyed. And, of course, our military. So we're in big trouble, Michael. This private insurance is the last thing we really got. And people better hope that their senators in that toilet bowl can ride on horses back into their state and knock this Obamacare down before it's the last thing to shut down American people.
The latest word is that the Senate is now moving ahead on their vote to fund the emergency spending bill for a government that can't control its wallet because they get the money from you, and it is including it deleted the language from the House to defund Obamacare. So now there's going to be a fight back and forth, and it's like professional wrestling. We know what's going to happen in the end. They're going to take more from you and give less back, because that's what they do. For those people who are on private health insurance programs, you're probably going to be into a shock, because we're hearing from all across the country how the rates are being tripled, literally overnight, because of Obamacare requirements. So even the people who already have insurance, yes, Obamacare is going to come down and it's going to just slap you upside of the head. Going to take a break for Phyllis Schlafly and commercials. We'll be right back. And aloha, America. Welcome back to the show. And they're just now announcing that apparently at the bottom of the hour, Obama is going to make a statement regarding the budget. The Senate did pass their version of the emergency spending bill. Now they're sending it back to the House with the attitude that, you know, if this doesn't work and the government shuts down, it's all the fault of that House of Representatives and this unnecessary opposition to Obamacare. And remember, the people who wrote that $88 million software package to enroll people, to track their medical records and calculate what benefits they're entitled to, are just saying it is not ready to go next week. But Obama wants to push it forward because he's listening to his ego. It's Obamacare. And everybody loves Obamacare. And thus, Obamacare will start on schedule. So, now, I want to jump back to the caller's comment about Dr. Michio Kaku saying that the solution to pollution is dilution, which is a wonderful little soundbite, and you need to understand that even though Dr. Kaku is a theoretical physicist, he's spent most of his career in the corporate media, using his reputation to sell you whatever the corporate media wants to sell you. Whether it's global warming, the Big Bang, don't worry about Fukushima, don't worry about the Gulf of Mexico. But the reality is, with regard to Fukushima, Dr. Kaku is wrong. Because the problem isn't the isotopes just floating in the water and sintering down to the bottom of the ocean. It is the ocean life that is consuming it. Because a fish that is contaminated off the coast of Fukushima is still just as radioactive when it's swimming off the coast of South America. And they have already captured salmon off the coast of San Diego, very heavily contaminated. It's a process called bioaccumulation. Fish that feed on the bottom, flounder, crab, lobster, are gobbling up that sintered down radioisotope material. And it is very, very dangerous. But again, they're trying to downplay it. Remember when, I'm trying to remember who it was saying, one of the talking bimbets, Ann Coulter, was saying, a little radiation is actually good for you. And of course, that is complete and utter nonsense. Have you noticed that the very same people saying that this roughly 85,000 times radiation release from the bomb that hit Hiroshima is no big deal are the same people who were a couple of years ago were screaming that a tiny teaspoon of cesium-137 embedded in dynamite was going to devastate an entire city in the hands of a terrorist? So, all right. Joining us on the phone right now is Karen Tostado from United We Strike. And Karen, aloha, welcome to the show. What's on your mind today?
Hi, Michael. Thank you for taking my call. Well, in terms of calling for a bank run, when I first set up, actually it was taxholiday2009.net. I had done that speaking with Max Egan, who helped me. I chose the 15th because I had learned that not only were our taxes mandatory, but they were voluntary. And I wanted a way to help educate people, and I initially wanted to tell them not to pay their taxes on the 15th. However, I spoke with Joe Bannister, who is the ex-special agent and enforcement agent for the IRS, who quickly told me that if I did that, I would be asking for trouble. He said not to wave a flag. He also cited the fact that he had gone to court. Now, he won his lawsuit, but Sherry Jackson Peel, who was a friend of his, went to jail for 4 years. I spoke to Sherry as well. I was told that I could talk around it, but I could not tell people not to pay taxes. Now, the 15th, though, was chosen specifically for that. So when it comes to telling people to go on a bank run, we also spoke to a friend of ours who is a published constitutional scholar and researcher. He said, it's like yelling fire in a theater. And when you remember that Karl Rove said, we create our own reality, and they're all bribed, we know that at any time they can completely ignore the rules in order for their own vested interests.
Well, we certainly know that, but I want to clarify something because I went and I looked at the law regarding bank runs, and it was written in the context of a deliberate financial manipulation where you put out false information about a bank to trigger a bank run to destroy a competitor, or because you've got credit default swaps on that bank and so forth. We're not talking about a bank run. We're talking about a bank boycott as a form of protest, and the bank run law doesn't cover that, because boycotting any business, bank, hardware store, grocery store, whatever, is considered a legitimate form of civil protest. It's peaceful, protected under the First Amendment.
Well, you know, whatever it says, though, Michael, time and time again, they break their own rules. And once the banks are threatened, once profit is threatened, we've seen that they will throw anyone and everyone under the bus in their quest for profit over people.
Okay,
so
but Karen, I mean, you know, if let's say tomorrow Obama launches a cruise missile strike into Syria, and, you know, 20 million Americans close their bank accounts. Are they going to put 20 million Americans in prison?
Well, now, that's always been the idea behind United We Strike, that we outnumber them. So when we really finally en masse take a stand, we will be honored. Right now, while people are still waking up, I think it's time to be discretionary, but at the same time to encourage people to understand just exactly what their money pays for. We have blood on our hands every single solitary night when we allow them to use our money toward their ends. We need to be in charge of what we have. We need to take possession of what we own.
Yeah, but again, looking at the backlash against this obviously stupid, brain-dead story that Assad gassed his own people in front of the UN chemical weapons inspectors, the huge public backlash against that shows that the majority of Americans are, in fact, now awake. And I think this trucker strike is a really good idea. I know the corporate media is trying to basically downplay it and dismiss it. I know Facebook took down their page. They're afraid right now of the American people waking up and realizing they are one people, and realizing the common enemy of the entire American people is this corrupt banking system and a government that is in its pocket. And, I mean, already back again today, they're trying to set up racial divisions. They're desperate to turn black Americans against white Americans and get us quarreling with each other so we're not paying attention to their little games.
Yeah, I agree. They are absolutely out of control. And we can even look at a bigger issue of morality. It is immoral to murder people. And it is immoral also for the rest of us simply to ignore the fact that this is being done on our dime. In terms of that, everything needs to stop as well. It's ridiculous to me that we can sit around a dinner table and actually talk about our government being the biggest drug running and gun running and pedophilia organization on the planet. We need to really reclaim our morality, and we also need to support each other in all forms of peaceful noncompliance that we are capable of doing. I'm fully in favor of everyone who owns anything to take possession, just like some of these people who have silver certificates or gold certificates. Even if you have a retirement fund, think about facing maybe taking a penalty in order to get your money out of their system.
Especially with all the haircuts coming. But I would add to that, I think now is the time for the American people to stand up and be visible and send two messages to the rest of the world. We, the people of the United States of America, do not believe all this nonsense about Assad. We, the people of the United States of America, do not consent to this government's endless wars. And most importantly, we, the people of the United States of America, will no longer be the wallet of last resort for Wall Street's business failings, because since at least the S&L bailout of the 1980s, the U.S. government's solution to every Wall Street problem is to transfer the losses onto the American people. And that ability and that promise to do so is what keeps foreign investment here in the United States of America. When those foreign investors get the message that we, the people, aren't going to pick up these business losses any longer, they'll start to pull out, and it's already happening. Foreign investment in this country is down by 1/3. Karen, thank you for the phone call. We got to take a break for commercials, and we'll be right back. Aloha, America. Welcome back to the show. And before we go back to the phones here, the backlash against the U.S. government bovine excrement about Assad gassing his own Alawite supporters, women and children, right in front of the UN chemical weapons inspectors, tells me that the majority of the American people are now awake. They understand this government lies to us about everything, to control us, to loot us of our wealth, to send us off to fight wars of conquest to prop up the banking system. And it is very important right now that every single American get out there, whether it's supporting Occupy, supporting the truckers' strike, supporting the million bikers going into Washington, D.C., and be seen and be visible to send this dual message to the rest of the world. Whatever the U.S. federal government is doing, they are doing it without the consent and approval and agreement of we the people. And most importantly, to send a message to all those foreign investors who are keeping their money here in the United States of America on the promise that if they make money, they can keep it, and if they lose money, the American people will be forced to cover the losses. And tell them that that promise is one the U.S. government can no longer keep. For two reasons. One, we won't go along with fascism. And two, we're out of money anyway. And that message is getting out there because foreign investment in the United States is in major decline. China's selling off more of their treasury bonds. They know what's coming here. But this is not the time to hide out and stay silent. This is the time to be visible. This is the time to be angry. Be peaceful. Be nonviolent. But be nonviolently non-cooperative. We have to let the rest of the world know that we, the people, have nothing to do with this. We are not responsible for the crimes of the U.S. government, just like the people of Israel are not responsible for the crimes of the Israeli government, just like the world's Muslims are not responsible for the crimes of Al-Qaeda, whoever that turns out to be. History very unfairly castigates an entire population for the crimes of the few at the top. We certainly see that with Nazi Germany, where even today our popular culture media, TV and movies portray all Germans of the World War II period as evil. Nobody's ever done a movie about the Order of the White Rose, who risked and lost their lives trying to speak out against the crimes of the Nazi regime. Tried to inform the German people. This was in the days before the internet. They'd print up pamphlets and just throw them off the roofs of buildings in the city. Let the wind carry them all over where people could read them. Why do we never see a movie about the Order of the White Rose? Because history demonizes all Germans collectively. Collective guilt is this big deal that we're supposed to hold entire people responsible for actions that were done beyond their control. Like this whole issue over slavery reparations for crimes committed by before we were even born. And same thing with Israel screaming today about the Holocaust, Holocaust, Holocaust. All of that stuff happened before all of you listening to this show were born. You had no influence over that. There was nothing you could do about it, and you should not accept responsibility for it. And so right now, for the sake of future history, for the sake of future generations of Americans, we all need to get out there and start screaming to the rest of the world that what this federal government is doing is their doing only. And we do not accept responsibility or blame for it because we do not agree with it, we do not approve of it, we do not consent to it. We are as much victims of this banker war policy as anybody else on the planet. We're going to go to the phones here. Obi in Colorado. Aloha, Obi. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Hi, Michael. I just wanted to make a comment about Michio Kaku. He was on an Art Bell show last week, and Art Bell is doing radio again, and he said that he didn't think that the fracking was a problem. And, you know, apparently...
Well, that tells you all you need to know about Michio Kaku.
Yeah, he proved to me that he's not worth listening to because he doesn't understand anything about, you know, fracking or the oil industry as a whole, very apparently.
Well, like I said, he does have the education of a theoretical physicist, but he spent most of his career in the corporate media. And he's out there pushing whatever the corporate media tells him to push. And I stopped listening to him a long, long time ago because I caught him in outright scientific errors that he was trying to sell to people. And so, yeah, I don't much pay attention to him any longer.
Well, one other point about the economy. I was getting $16 a month in food stamps. I'm now only getting $15 a month.
Somebody else sent in a statement they got. They're like permanently disabled, and they're totally dependent on food stamps, and they were getting something like $3.55 a month, and it just got cut to something like $50, $60. It's just draconian. And of course, the Congress just voted to slash food stamp funding by almost $40 billion over the next 10 years. You know, we got plenty of money to spy on the American people, got plenty of money for war, plenty of money for the cops to go out and bash the Occupy protesters, but no money to help those people who are victims of this predatory banking system.
Well, that's correct, and I'm on total disability because I have spinal cord damage, and, you know, I have to live on $800 a month, and I have to spend $150 a month for groceries for me and my wife. That's all we have.
Yeah, it's grim out there. It is very, very grim, and now's the time we all have to get angry. The American people now understand, the majority of the American people now understand this government is not working for we the people. It's working for the bankers. It's working for the war machine. It is almost shameless in its slavish devotion to Tel Aviv. And it's time to go back and reread that Declaration of Independence, when a long train of abuses and usurpations, pursuing invariably the same object, evinces a design to reduce them under absolute despotism. It is their right, it is their duty to throw off such government.
Well, I support the trucker strike, and we've stocked up on a little bit of extra food to get through anything, but I would just say go truckers, and we need to organize more of it. I'm beyond angry. I want to see a peaceful revolution.
Well, I think one is already underway. And so far it's a virtual revolution, which is great because we don't have little kids getting killed by stray bullets fired by those federal workers getting all those free guns and bullets. But how violent it will get, of course, is totally under the control of the federal government, and they are clearly arming for a violent confrontation with the 50 states and the American people. Our best possible outcome is a collapse of the financial system, which would bring that central federal government down with it. And we have to be ready with our own new blueprint for the new America to prevent the carpetbaggers coming in and just trying to restart the same scam all over again, because I guarantee you they will. Those private bankers, they will just dip into their pocket and they will fund all these front people to come back out here and say, oh, no, it was never the Federal Reserve. We need a new one. Look how good things will be with the new Federal Reserve. And anybody who's out there saying that, anybody who's out there saying that we need to give the money creation authority of the public currency to a privately owned central bank needs to be tarred, feathered, hanged, drawn, quartered, burned, and the ashes peed on by a rabid dog.
Well, I would agree with that, or at the very least, put them in a boat, tie a lead weight around their waist, and drop them off into the ocean.
Yeah. Or basically, realizing that these are mentally ill people, they're money addicts, is we need a treatment center where they're simply kept and cared for and fed, but they're not allowed access to any money for the rest of their lives. That would be a suitable punishment. We got to take a break for commercials. We'll be back with more phone calls after these words from our sponsors. And aloha, America. Welcome back to the show. And everybody's waiting for Obama to come out and make his statement about the necessity of raising the debt and all of that. And as usual, of course, he's stalling and delaying to build the suspense and make sure everybody's just ready to hang on his every word. It's an old show business trick. We're going to go to the phones here. John in Arizona. Aloha, John. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind? John in Arizona, are you there?
Yes, I'm here. Can you hear me?
Yes, you're on the air. What's on your mind today?
Yeah, Mike, I just wanted to let you know that there is actually a movie out there regarding the Order of the White Rose. It's called Sophie Scholl, The Last Days. It's an excellent movie, and the parallels between what happens in that movie and what's happening now are just astounding. I think you can get it on YouTube.
Would you email me the name of that? I'm going to see if I can hunt it down and put it up there. And certainly it was not a movie that was heavily promoted in the corporate media. And we know there are some interesting movies out there that tell interesting stories that just sort of don't get paid a lot of attention. And the last one I can think of course, is The Independent, which was a very excellent movie about the involvement in banks in starting wars in order to profit from the debt the wars create. And they made a valid point, and for some reason the corporate media just kind of like, we're not going to pay any attention to that one.
Right. Well, this was a sleeper. It's actually a German production with subtitles, but it's well worth a look.
All righty, well, send that to me, and I will definitely hunt that down, because
Okay, we'll do.
that's definitely one of the hidden parts of history from Germany during the Nazi times, was that the large numbers of the German people didn't agree with what their government was doing, just like large percentage of the American people don't agree with what this government is doing. And we need to get that out there for the rest of the world to see. All right, they're still waiting for Obama to come out there and talk about the debt ceiling. And they're going back and forth on this whole thing. And everybody's trying to basically capitalize on this tension. They're trying to link funding or defunding of abortion to it. Apparently, the GOP is pushing for the end of net neutrality as a condition for raising the debt ceiling. So everybody is using this crisis for their own agenda. By the way, little fact you should be aware of. Under President Obama, the debt ceiling has already been raised 7 times, adding $43,000 to every American household in debt that you are expected to turn over in taxes, plus accruing interest, for which you will receive nothing back at all. I want to read you an interesting quote. Quote, "The fact that we are here today to debate raising America's debt limit is a sign of leadership failure. It is a sign that the U.S. government cannot pay its own bills. It is a sign that we now depend on ongoing financial assistance." Okay, we apparently have lost our Skype connection. And let's see if we can get them back here. And we're reconnecting with Republic Broadcasting. Okay. We are, okay, Bambuser is still working, I'm being told, but for some reason, all of a sudden, we've lost our link to RBN. Let's see. Let's see if the text windows are actually working. See if we can get in there again. No, it says there's an internet connection problem, and it looks like it may be over at RBN's end. So, but let me finish this quote.
"The person whom you're trying to reach is currently unavailable.
Okay, apparently...
Please leave a message after the beep."
Okay, all right. Well, we're still trying to reconnect here to RBN. And don't you just love living in a fascist dictatorship where nothing really works? And by the way, for you Apple users, there's already an update for the iOS 7. There are already so many problems are surfacing on that one. So I'm going to go ahead and try and reconnect with RBN. And while we do that, let me finish this quote. Quote, "The fact that we are here today to debate raising America's debt limit is a sign of leadership failure. It is a sign that the U.S. government cannot pay its own bills. It is a sign that we now depend on ongoing financial assistance from foreign countries to finance our government's reckless fiscal policies. Increasing America's debt weakens us domestically and internationally. Leadership..."
"The person whom you're trying to reach is currently unavailable."
Apparently they've had a problem there at the RBN control room. Getting back to this quote, "Leadership means that the buck stops here. Instead, Washington is shifting the burden of bad choices today onto the backs of our children and grandchildren. America has a debt problem and a failure of leadership. Americans deserve better." That was Senator Barack Obama in March of 2006. And he was back there correctly pointing out that raising the debt ceiling represented a failure of leadership, and here he is today saying, we got to raise the debt ceiling. We've got to pay our bills. What you mean we, paleface? To revive that old Lone Ranger joke. We, the people, didn't spend that money. We, the people, didn't go along with funding these wars of conquest. We, the people, never agreed to looting the wealth of the nation to prop up Wall Street when TARP was being arm wrestled through Congress, that grand benevolent asylum for the aged and infirm. The polls were running 90% opposition, 9-1. People were telling Congress, do not use the public's money to save Wall Street from their own failings. And Congress did it anyway. So, And now they're here doing it, and we're about 10 minutes past where Obama was supposed to speak, so he's grandstanding, making people wait to build the suspense to make sure everybody's tuned in. It's an old show business trick here. All righty. As I already mentioned, the Republicans want to kill net neutrality as one of their conditions for increasing the debt ceiling. As I mentioned earlier, China is selling their U.S. bonds. They're getting out from underneath it. Alarmingly, and this comes on the heels of all of these situations where we were seeing technical glitches in Nationwide that were showing all the savings account as empty, and Bank of England having technical difficulties that shut down their transactions for a while. Well, now we get word of a banking holiday in Panama, where the National Bank of Panama announced it was suspending all services until Tuesday, the 1st of October. Now, they're saying it's to upgrade systems. But there was no early warning saying on this weekend we're going to be upgrading our systems. Please make preparations for that. They simply said, bank holiday, we're upgrading our systems. We'll be back on Tuesday. Now, the people of Panama don't have access to ATMs or their bank accounts, and this weekend is payday for people all across Panama. Italy is on the verge of being downgraded to junk status by Standard & Poor's. And of course, we have that situation over in Greece where the military have given the current president, the pro-banker, pro-bailout president, who was elected with massive vote fraud after the anti-banker party won but couldn't form a coalition government. And the army has given him until tomorrow to step down, or they will remove him. Now, getting back on here to the situation with Syria, al-Assad is basically saying that at this point, there is no guarantee that the U.S. is not just going to go ahead and attack Syria. And we understand that this has nothing to do with chemical weapons, has nothing to do with terrorism, has nothing to do with a popular revolution. This is an overthrow of a nation as part of that larger plan that General Wesley Clark blew the whistle on some years ago. War for the bankers. War with Syria is the final stepping stone to launching the war with Iran. And that is why, despite this Russian-Syrian chemical weapons deal, the U.S. is going to find some way to break that deal, make it look like it's Syria's fault, and launch the attack. Now, apparently in Syria, things are deteriorating even further. We've been talking about how these different factions of the rebels are fighting amongst each other, and then all of a sudden they form their own Islamic coalition that rejects the Syrian National Council that the U.S. was putting in to be Abbas' replacement. And McCain has been out there saying, well, yes, we're sending weapons to Syria, but we're only sending them to the moderates. Now we're finding out the moderates are now joining this Islamic coalition. So the situation on the ground in Syria is changing dramatically. And if Assad is removed from office, this Islamic coalition is going to take over. It will be more anti-American and anti-Israel than Abbas was. What's the U.S. going to do? Say we need to invade Syria again? That's going to be a tough sell. Alrighty, now normally we would be starting a commercial break at this point. I'm going to talk on through it, but I'm going to go ahead and see if I can find out what's going on over at RBN. And see if we can get that. I'm actually going to call into the phone line here and see if I can find out what's going on here. That's 313-9.
The person whom you're trying to reach is currently unavailable.
Definitely
Please
not
leave
still
a message after
connecting, and I'm just going to get the word from the control room. Hi, why am I not able to connect to Republic? Okay, well, I'm going to keep on doing my show over Bambuser, and as soon as we can reconnect, just go ahead and connect with me on Skype. It's that hamster again, isn't it? I told you we got to feed that hamster in that little wire wheel that generates the electricity that keeps us all going. All right, well, Well, yeah, because it's saying, yeah, it says you're not available. It's the NSA. The NSA is, that hamster is an NSA plant. Have him shot and skinned. All right, I'm going to go back to doing my show on Bambuser, and I'll be here as soon as you can connect. Thanks an awful lot. All right, bye-bye. All right, well, there we have it from the control room. Our little hamster that runs in the wire wheel, connected to the generator that powers all of RBN, has apparently gone on strike or whatever's going on, and they've had a major technical problem in the control room. They're working to restore it. I'm going to continue the show here on Bambuser, and hopefully RBN will be able to reconnect to me before the top of the hour when Michelle Rosen is expected to join us to talk about the Tylenol situation. Now, not too long ago, of course, British Prime Minister David Cameron was on this bandwagon, we've got to invade Syria, we've got to invade Syria, and suffered a huge political embarrassment when Parliament absolutely voted it down, because the British people understand that this is just another made-up story of an atrocity to sell a war that nobody really wants, just like Saddam's nuclear weapons. And the British government, apparently as insensitive to the will of the people as the United States government, is apparently launching a costly taxpayer-funded program to remarket war to the British people, to make it more palatable. War, it's fantastic. They're literally trying to market and sell war to the British people, who are tired of paying for wars, tired of seeing their kids get killed. The only way they could even begin to think about selling a new war to either the British or the American people is for a new false flag. And pretty much everybody who's been studying current events says, yeah, that's the last card they've got to play. Huge, big false flags someplace. Got to be even bigger than airplanes crashing into skyscrapers. To launch the war all at once. Oh, it was the Syrian, Iranian, Chinese, Korean, Russian, Nimtian, whatever. And we've got to attack all of them now to save America for future generations. My goodness. Now, John Kerry is out there talking about the possibility of reaching a deal with Iran sometime over the next 3 months. Rouhani has come across as a moderate. He's saying we're willing to negotiate, and because of the drubbing the U.S. took over the Syria deal, they're having to at least go through the motions of looking like they're going to talk with Iran, even though we understand the real agenda for war with Iran's got nothing to do with their power station. It's all about the money. All about the money. Meanwhile, AIPAC, which bet its reputation on being able to get the Congress to vote through an authorization for war with Syria, and was politically embarrassed by that failure, is now gearing up to basically oppose Obama for his new willingness to talk with Iran. And so AIPAC is literally broadcasting that they're calling the shots, or they think they're calling the shots here. And maybe it's just their ego and their vanity. They're right now feeling a desperate, desperate need to prove to the world they are still in control of the United States government. So they're already out there, they're ramping up, they're getting out their checkbooks. They're getting their lobbyists up there to Congress to defeat Obama on Iran. Well, you know something? AIPAC is not an elected governmental body. It's not their job to set the military course of the United States of America. They're trying to steal our military and tell them who to make war on, Israel's enemies. And they are aided by a Congress that views your children as slaves to be sold, as mercenaries to whoever's got the money to come up with it. And that's not what our military signed up to do. To be cargo, to be rented to other countries to make war on the other country's enemies. And yes, I understand, and you understand, that there are overlapping reasons for the war with Iran. Israel's got their agenda, smashing a regional competitor. The U.S. has its agenda, supporting the petrodollar in Bretton Woods. But for AIPAC to be out there openly declaring that they are going to be the deciding factor in the situation with Iran It is a foreign policy lobby. It should be registered and treated and controlled as one, regulated as one. By the way, CNN is taking a lot of heat over their apparently mistranslation of Iran President Rouhani's statement on the Holocaust. Now, when Rouhani was being interviewed, it was almost inevitable they were going to bring up the question about the Holocaust to bait him into saying something that could be used to demonize him. Oh, the Holocaust, the Holocaust, the Holocaust. And what he basically said in a nutshell is, you know, I'm not a historian, and this is up to the historians to define what actually happened, but we condemn any kind of crime committed against humanity throughout all of history, including those committed by the Nazis against both the Jews and the non-Jews. And CNN mistranslated it, apparently intentionally, to try and castigate Rouhani for denying the Holocaust, for evading the issue. And CNN got called on it. Why is the Holocaust even an issue right now? Whatever it is that happened back then happened before we were all alive. We had nothing to do with it. It's not a current event. But it is the foundation on which Israel rests its political agenda to take away the Palestinians' land, even though the Palestinians certainly had nothing to do with the crimes of the Nazis. The reason Israel has always made a big deal, and I agree with Rouhani and Ahmadinejad, it's certainly been exaggerated. The newspapers in Germany from before World War II put the total Jewish population of Germany at only 600,000. So where'd that extra 5,400,000 come from? And don't forget, even the museum at Auschwitz reduced the number of people who died there of all causes, of all races, by 2.5 million. And yet that 6 million remains enshrined. It's not a factual reference. It's a religious one. It's from the Talmud. It is a religious prophecy that when the Jews lose 6 million people, then they will return to the Holy Land. And they were using that same 6 million over and over and over again during their propaganda in World War I. So why so much focus on this Holocaust? It's not like there weren't other mass crimes of humanity throughout history, including far more recent ones. It's very, very simple when you think about it. At the end of World War II, the entire world had united and spent much blood and treasure against the Axis powers to basically say no government has a right to march into somebody else's country and simply take it for their own use. Nazi Germany could not be allowed to march into France and take it for their use, could not be allowed to march into Poland and take it for their use, and yet this was exactly what the Zionists were doing, saying we're going to march into Palestine and take it for our own. And so the Zionists needed a propaganda device that was so powerful and shocking and overwhelming that the very same nations that had been willing to go to war to say that the Nazis couldn't go into Poland would turn around and say, yeah, I guess it's okay for the Zionists to go into Palestine. And yes, the story of what happened in Nazi Germany has been exaggerated. If you actually visit those camps, and I did when I was working in Germany, they'll openly tell you these were slave labor camps. The people who were in there were making uniforms and boots and other things for the German military. They were a resource not to be wasted. But the story got blown up and inflated, where delousing became gassing, which is why you have all these Holocaust survivors running around saying, I survived being gassed 5 or 6 times. Well, it wasn't very effective gassing, was it? Because it was actually supposed to kill the body lice that were carrying the typhus. And that is why Israel to this very day protects that legend of the Holocaust as fiercely as they do. Because without it, the world would realize what the Zionists did to Palestine was really not all that different than what the Nazis did to France. And that's why they struggle to protect it as much as possible and demonize anybody who questions it and try and use that as a political tool against other countries. And it's a continuation of the crime of heresy. You must believe what we tell you to believe, or you're a heretic and you must be dealt with. But given the extent to which we now know we have been lied to about Saddam's nuclear weapons, about Assad's chemical weapons, torpedoes in the Gulf of Tonkin, the USS Liberty, 9/11 itself, prudence demands we go back and re-examine carefully everything we have ever been taught by the state-controlled schools and the corporate-owned media. Propaganda only works when a population doesn't realize they're being propagandized, when they naively and innocently presume the government and the media are being truthful to them. But once they know they're being lied to, you have what we have in the United States today, a population looking for reasons not to believe the official story. And once you're looking for those reasons, you find them. They're very much there, like that down at the Kenya Mall, the victim with the red stain on the back of his jacket and what looked like bullet holes, and it's obviously not real blood. And if he'd really been shot where those bullet holes are, he would not be standing up, let alone walking. We live in an age of lies. The American people were the most lied to people on the face of the earth. Meanwhile, over in Great Britain, the members of Parliament have sworn new fealty and allegiance to Israel. They bow down before Tel Aviv and say, "Please, oh Master, tell us what to think, what to believe." Now, not too long ago on whatreallyhappened.com, we posted an article. It was an op-ed, "Let's be honest about Israel's nukes." And it was a New York Times op-ed that appeared in the New York Times website and overseas editions, but was never printed in the U.S. edition. They're still trying to hide from the American people that Israel has nuclear weapons. Why? Very simply. Because it is illegal under U.S. law for the United States government to send your tax money to any nation that has nuclear weapons, will not sign the Non-Proliferation Treaty, will not allow IAEA inspections. And that's Israel. The instant the United States admits Israel has nuclear weapons, then the American people are owed a refund of every single penny taken from the American people and sent to Israel in clear violation of the Symington Amendment to the Foreign Appropriations Act and the Glenn Act. And that's not an inconsiderable sum of money. It's more than 4 times the entire cost of the Apollo Moon program, for which we have received no giant leap for mankind. All right, since we are not connected to RBN, I'm just going to keep on doing the show right through the commercial breaks. Seymour Hersh has now come out with a new story, basically declaring the raid that supposedly killed Osama bin Laden in 2011 is one big lie. And it's just flat out declared not one word of the Obama administration's narrative on what happened is true. And we already knew that, because there were all these faked up pictures purporting to show a dead Osama bin Laden with the SEALs, and every one of them was a fake, and they weren't even done all that well. And we ripped them apart on our website, until finally the White House said, "We will release no more pictures out of respect to the dead guy who we dumped in the ocean." Now, common sense has to tell you, if you have hard, actual evidence that something has happened, you don't dare risk using fraud and fakery. Because if fraud or fakery is detected, it undermines the credibility of everything else you've got. So if you find one evidence of fraud in an official story, it means the entire official story is a fraud. And Hersh has finally caught up with whatreallyhappened.com. Now, getting back to that story down at the mall in Kenya, we are seeing a story now that Kenya's National Intelligence Agency, the NIS, gave advance warning to certain individuals not to go to the Westgate shopping mall in Nairobi ahead of that attack. Now, obviously, the 67 people who were killed in that didn't get the warning. Because if we're going to have a terror attack, we need bloody bodies and we need bloody shirts, even if we have to fake some of them, like that guy in the white jacket. But here we have the fact that Kenya's spy agency knew it was going to happen before it happened and issued warnings to certain key people not to go there. Just like certain people were told to stay off the airplanes before 9/11. This is another false flag attack, and I think it's a prequel to a really big bang they're planning for here in the United States of America to try and get the war agenda back on track. And everybody listening to this show, we need to talk about false flags because we've seen so many of them. And we know that this government is in a corner and it's desperate and will try desperate things. And the only way we're going to get them to call off a new false flag in the United States of America is if we can make them doubt the official story will be believed. We have to be ready to stand up there and say, you're lying, we know you're lying. We do not believe anything you say. We have to shake their confidence. And they are still confident. They're still arrogant enough to think that we're all a bunch of morons who will just buy anything that shows up, in a newspaper, like the new IPCC report, saying, yes, there's global warming and it's all the fault of you people. And it's nonsensical, and it's been disproved time and time again. And they're raising on a busted flush. So they actually apparently still do believe that they can put out any lame story and the American people will just believe and throw their money and their babies onto the designated enemy. Probably they're already out there trying to convince themselves, aided by copious amounts of whiskey, that the backlash against the lie in Syria was a unique, isolated event, not to be repeated in the future. A lot of these people are still in denial. They still think they're living in the years at the height of the Cold War, the 1950s and 1960s, where they could make up any nonsensical story, crazed lone nut assassin in a bookstore, and be believed. But those days are gone forever. And we, the people, we have to be willing to openly talk about the potential for a government false flag with our friends, our neighbors, and our coworkers, so that when the big bang happens, we're not fooled by it. And of course, the flip side to that is very simple. If there is a big bang, even those people who believe the official story are going to be saying, well, obviously this proves the NSA spying didn't work to save us from acts of terror. Didn't work in Boston, didn't work in Nairobi. TSA didn't work to save us. Department of Homeland Security didn't work to save us. If we need to balance the federal budget, let's start by cutting these very costly agencies that are violating the Constitution and don't accomplish their stated goals. Okay. Very bizarre story here. Teenager who worked at Goodwill charged with a felony after giving needy customers discounts on merchandise. Technically, the teenager is right. It was in violation of the law. That's not his property. It's the store's property. But I can understand why he did it. And I've seen store clerks around here do that too. Now, a lot of people have been talking about our brand new $100 bill, the new super counterfeit-proof bill. And apparently, they're having to go back to the printing presses a third time. Now, the way it actually works, we talk about the Federal Reserve and their printing presses. The Federal Reserve does not have their own printing presses. They hire the U.S. Treasury Department to print up their paper money. And the first attempt at the brand new counterfeit-proof $100 bill didn't work. There were blank spaces all over it. So those were returned and had to be destroyed. And the Federal Reserve asked for their printing fee back. Then they came back for a second try. And apparently the presses are blurring the ink. And it's the crispness of the image on the bill, which is one of the anti-counterfeiting measures. And now those got botched up and they're being sent back. I think it's time to go back to coins with real silver in them as the basis of our monetary system. Because that's what this nation was started with. The money was the physical coin. And specifically the silver or gold or copper or nickel that was in it. The paper notes were not money. They were claim checks for the money. And it was a system that worked to make the United States and the American people prosperous. Because back then the public currency was a public utility, and it was handled as a public utility for the common good. We need to get back to that system here. Now, getting over to the NSA, and by the way, we had a caller on the show yesterday who was telling us about this South Park episode that was making fun of the NSA and people who accept government as the new religion. And I did catch the replay last night, and it was very funny. And apparently it really soared in the ratings. People just really plugged into that. Meanwhile, over in the real world of the NSA, apparently at the Senate Intelligence Committee hearing on Thursday, NSA Director General Keith Alexander flat out said he thinks it's in the nation's best interest to put all the phone records into a lockbox, to collect everything on everybody, all of it a violation of the Fourth Amendment. Now, over at the United States Supreme Court, Justice Antonin Scalia has taken the position that the Fourth Amendment doesn't cover conversations between people. He's trying to weasel out of the Fourth Amendment by saying when you're talking with other people, that's not covered by the Fourth Amendment. Now, when the Fourth Amendment was written, people had conversations in their private homes, and the Fourth Amendment said the government couldn't come in there to listen to your conversations in your home. And Scalia is trying to take the position that because there is a new technology that was not in existence when the Constitution was written, the new technology is not covered by the Bill of Rights. And yet, the precedent in Supreme Court decisions is against him, because the right to freedom of speech, when that First Amendment was written, was about speaking and the press. But when telegraph came along, and then telephone, and then radio and TV, they were all presumed to be covered by that First Amendment. And so if a conversation was protected by the Fourth Amendment 200 years ago, it's protected today. And if a landline telephone was supposed to be protected speech, and obviously it no longer is in this country, they've gone completely off the constitutional reservation, and Chief Justice Antonin Scalia in the Supreme Court is just trying to find a rationalization. And it is a reminder that those judges are not impartial arbiters of the law. For one thing, that 180-degree flip by Chief Justice Roberts on Obamacare tells you they are subject to coercion and political pressure. The judges are there to pretend like they're impartial arbiters of the law, but they're really there to enforce the official policy on the people. My goodness. And, apparently the healthcare fight is heading back to the House. They're still talking about a compromise position where instead of either funding or defunding Obamacare, the compromise position will be a one-year delay. I think it's an excellent idea, if for no other reason than the fact that the people who wrote that software package that's supposed to manage all of this are saying it just is not ready. It just is not ready. Okay. Now then, we've been getting some news from the Curiosity rover on Mars. Last week they were talking about how Curiosity failed to detect methane, even though earlier probes had done, and everybody's saying, oh, well, this may mean there's no life on Mars. But again, it's an equivocal result, and as we learned to our disappointment on the Viking landers, sometimes those experiments have design flaws that don't surface until you're in the real environment. But a very interesting discovery, and again, it's not a complete surprise to those of us who've been following this all along, is the Curiosity rover was digging for soil samples and found water. They found water in the Martian soil. Liquid water. Now, probably because of the low temperatures on Mars, this is water that has a very heavy salt content or something to keep it from freezing. But I remember one of my very favorite pictures from the Viking missions was an image that actually showed what looks like snow on the ground. Now, it's not snow that falls in flakes. It just froze out of the air, and it was a mixture of both water ice and carbon dioxide. It's called a clathrate. But it was a very interesting picture of the Martian landscape with all this white all over it. But I keep thinking back to the beginning of the Curiosity mission when they were hinting there was a discovery that they had made that was going to rewrite the textbooks, and then the next week it had completely gone away. And I look back at the way NASA was pressured to move away from the evidence that Viking had discovered indigenous life on Mars. And I think what's going on there is that I think the governments of the world, certainly the religious leaders and the money junkies as well, understand that if it were absolutely confirmed that there is life on other worlds, it would be a socially transformative event. And people might put down their rakes, their hoes, their swords, their guns, their bombs, and say, wow, now we know for a fact we are not alone in this universe. Let's stop quarreling with each other. Let's go out there and find them. I think what's going on here is a repeat of what happened with Marco Polo. Now, we've all seen movies and heard about Marco Polo, but there's an aspect to his story that not a lot of people really know unless they have really studied his life carefully. When Marco Polo returned from the Orient with stories of this amazing culture, the church grabbed him, specifically the Dominicans, and they threw him in jail. In isolation. Nobody was allowed to talk to him. And the reason for that was that the church leaders, who were basically also in charge of the government at that time, realized that if the general population were made aware of another civilization far to the east that was flourishing and didn't even know anything about Jesus and had their own gods, it would undermine the authority of the church and government in the Holy Roman Empire, which operated at that time under the illusion that, hey, we've got all the answers and that's all you need to know. But of course, word of what Marco Polo had found did get out, and eventually they were forced to release him. But we know from this past history that governments and leaders don't want you to know about things that might undermine their illusion of supremacy or infallibility. And I remember when we were back there on Viking, and Dr. Jeff Levin's labeled release experiment showed exactly the response curve that indicated biological activity. And there was a huge firestorm of pressure coming in from members of Congress who were saying that, if you'll give me just a second, I have to take this phone call here. Yeah, Michelle, the reason you're not being called is RBN's control room has had a technical glitch, and I'm doing my show on... Oh, okay, well, so I'm doing my show over Bambuser, but we'll reschedule for next week, okay? Yeah, it's RBN's control room. They're off the air, and I'm just doing my show for the Bambuser. All right, bye-bye. All right, that was Michelle Rosen, who was wondering why we were ignoring her and neglecting her. So to get back to this situation where we're talking about Jeff Levin's labeled release experiment on Viking had shown exactly the response curve that we would see if there was ongoing life in the soil samples that were taken. And we were getting calls from members of Congress screaming that their religious constituents were just absolutely opposed to there being life on Mars because it's not mentioned in the Bible. And Earth is God's highest creation, and there can't be life elsewhere. And they literally were saying, if you declare there's life out there and upset my religious constituents, we're going to have to look at your budget with skeptical eyes next year. So NASA basically ignored the labeled release experiment, and they went with the results from what was called the gas chromatograph mass spectrometer. which was supposed to detect organic molecules and did not, and said, okay, well, if there's no organic molecules, then we can throw out Jeff Levin's results and declare that Mars has no life on it. Of course, now we know from subsequent missions that the Martian soil is loaded with a class of chemicals called perchlorates, which decompose organic molecules when they're exposed to heat. So the design of that experiment, the GCMS, meant that it could never find organic molecules because in the process of running the experiment to detect those molecules, the molecules were being destroyed by the Martian soil. Other scientists around the world have looked at the raw data from Viking and said, yeah, those guys, they found life. There was definitely life there. And we know NASA stands for never a straight answer. But the more I think about it, the more I think that there is a desire by the leaders of this world to not have it known that there's life on other worlds. For exactly the same reason that the Holy Roman Empire threw Marco Polo in prison, because they didn't want their subjugated Christian population to be aware that there was an equally powerful and great civilization that was not under the control of the church. Let's see, little story here. I mentioned this earlier in the show. There is a new book out basically commenting on the fact that Fukushima Unit 3 did suffer a low-order nuclear explosion, and it wasn't by hydrogen, which we already knew from the color of the resulting plume here. Interesting story here. Fire Marshal is coming out here. This is over at enterprisenews.com. That it's time to exempt homeowners from hazardous material law. And the story is about this homeowner who her children found an old-fashioned mercury medical thermometer at the bottom of a drawer in the bathroom. Now, those are now considered illegal because mercury has been declared a highly toxic substance. And it is, let's be honest. And the children were playing with the thermometer and dropped and broke it. And this woman, Fernanda Protella, did what she was supposed to do and called the Hazardous Materials Response Unit from the local fire department, who turned over the cleanup to a private company who billed this woman $4,000 to clean up a broken mercury thermometer. And this is a classic case of government overkill. Yes, mercury is toxic, but it's very easy for you to just clean up and throw in a jar to remove it from the environment. You don't need $4,000 worth of services coming into your home over that tiny, tiny drop of mercury in a mercury thermometer. Meanwhile, of course, the government has been urging people to buy those compact fluorescent energy-efficient light bulbs which contain mercury already in its dangerous vapor form. And they're much easier to break than a mercury thermometer. In fact, some of them explode on their own. And there have been other stories of people who dropped and broke these compact fluorescent bulbs, did what they were supposed to, called the fire department, called the various services, and wound up with thousands of dollars in cleanup costs for a toxic spill in their home. It's just all about finding reasons to loot the people, and it is overkill. And this fire marshal say, yeah, it's, you know, you shouldn't be treating homeowners who have a drop of mercury spill on the floor the same way you would treat an industrial corporation that has dumped gallons of mercury compounds into the environment. And they're absolutely right. It doesn't matter how much you submit to the government. You are never going to live in a toxic-free environment. The perversity of the universe tends toward a maximum. There's always going to be something out there that is harmful and dangerous to you. And especially with this government that's charging this woman $4,000 to clean up a mercury thermometer at the same time they continue to protect the GMO industry, dangerous pharmaceuticals, dangerous antidepressants. It's just classic politics. This is a problem, and we're going to charge you to solve the problem. These are making money, and we're going to ignore the fact that they might not be perfectly healthy. It's all driven by the money. And again, I don't have a problem with people who want to be rich. I'd like to be rich myself. We look at people like a Steve Jobs or a James Cameron, who got rich by producing products and movies that we voluntarily trade our money for. That is the way you're supposed to get rich under capitalism. But these financial scammers who game the system and buy the Congress to write the laws to guarantee a constant flow of the people's wealth into their pockets, that's not capitalism. That's fascism. And we must oppose it. Because there has never in all of history been a fascist government that worked for the people. Now, another interesting little story. This is coming out of Yellowstone National Park. And if you've never been there, and you live in the continental United States of America, make an effort to go over and visit the place. It is amazing. It is also the top of a dormant supervolcano. And it's understood that the volcano is dormant, it is not extinct. And recently, they just got rattled by a triple swarm of earthquakes. In other words, they had a swarm of earthquakes, minor earthquakes, 3.6, in 3 separate locations all at the same time. And that's never been seen before. Now, it's way too soon to be heading for the hills, but obviously the concern is that at some point in the future, we're going to see it erupt again. And these supervolcanoes, when they erupt, they are global phenomenon. Whether it's Yellowstone or Toba, there's never been a supervolcano eruption in all of recorded history. When Toba blew, I think if I recall correctly, it's 60,000 years ago, there were humans around, and it does coincide with a serious decline in the human population in the fossil record. But it's a reminder that for all the pretensions of science, and we are in control, and we're in control of the government nature, no, you're not. The human race technology is nowhere near able to stop the continents from drifting, to stop the volcanoes from erupting, to stop the next ice age. Those politicians who are out there saying, oh, the world is warmer and it's your fault and you've got to give us money, they're snake oil salesmen. Same thing with the modern pharmaceutical industry and all their vaccines and all these invented psychological diseases for which pills are available for sale. They're operating on the same moral level as those traveling Wild West medicine show salesmen. Run that painted, colorful wagon into the middle of town, crank down that backstage, get out there, have some dancing girls, and the pitchman comes out and says, out there on the Great Plain is a scourge laying waste to the native tribes, and it's heading this way, and the only way you will save yourselves is to buy this bottle of whatever it is he's selling, usually pepper oil and water. And he makes his money, and he goes away. He's happy. The town people drink the pepper oil. They don't actually get sick because there never was a great scourge out there on the Great Plains. They're happy. They're just duped out of their money. And this is how government has always operated. They are fraudsters. We are living in a real-life version of the Matrix. They're all charlatans. And that is why when this nation was started, the founding fathers set it up to be just completely, the power to be diffused across the land, because the more you concentrate power, the more it becomes an attractive target for those con artists. And it is the curse of political power everywhere, that it attracts the very sort of people who should never be allowed to have it. Now, speaking of the religiously deranged, Pat Robertson is now out there claiming that gays are intentionally spreading AIDS. That's his latest rant. Oh, those gays, they're deliberately trying to infect people. And apparently he's drawn so much criticism for that that he is resorting to using the Digital Millennium Copyright Act to stifle criticism by sending out DMCA takedown notices for anybody who was quoting him. Even though quoting somebody for the purposes of commentary, or in this case, ridicule and abuse, is a legitimate practice under the copyright laws. It's called the Fair Use Doctrine. Now, you can't just copy somebody's complete article or somebody's complete music or somebody's complete video and just put it on your website and let it sit there. That is a copyright violation unless the author of the article or the music or the video has placed it in the public domain. But you are allowed to take bits and pieces of other people's works, excerpts, and comment on them for the purposes of public education. That's why the fair use doctrine is in there, to encourage dialogue, so that when Pat Robertson comes out and says gays are intentionally spreading AIDS, other people can stand up and say, okay, Pat Robertson is saying this, and here is why he is wrong. That's where dialogue comes from. Thesis, gays intentionally spreading AIDS. Antithesis, Pat Robertson is full of it. Synthesis, we maybe need to look at just what's going on with the AIDS virus. Apparently, engineers have now developed a solar cell with 44.7% efficiency, converting light. This is a major breakthrough. Everyone's always talking about solar power and solar cells, and it's a really good idea in theory, but up until recently, the actual efficiency of solar cells to convert light to electricity has been rather poor. Probably at some point you've been suckered into buying one of these little gizmos for your keychain with a solar cell that you're supposed to plug into your cell phone and charge it, and you discover very quickly that you have to leave it sitting in the sun for like 10 hours to get even the beginning of a charge. Alrighty, let's see. This is kind of a frustrating thing with RBN being down. I didn't have my on-air guest. I'm not able to take phone calls. I've actually run out of my talking points, so I'm going to go over here and just skip through what the members are posting and do some commentary, because we have another half hour here, and I don't want to quit prematurely on the off chance RBN's actually going to get back here before the top of the hour. But it looks like whatever happened over there was really, really bad. So, anyway. Let's see. Anti-malaria drug endangers British troops. And, well, we see this so much with the pharmaceutical industry. They'll look at these modern commercials. Very well-produced, very expensive commercials for this brand new, synthetically created, altered molecule that will cure whatever they're going to cure. And then there's that voice at the end of it saying, use of this drug can lead to all sorts of bad things, including death. And apparently they work because people aren't listening to those messages that these drugs can kill you on occasion. They rush into their doctor and say, I saw a wonderful commercial for hydroflammastimulant, and I want some of that. And the doctor says, all right, here's your paper note. It's all about the marketing here. And apparently the British Ministry of Defense mandated an anti-malarial drug to their own troops, which has some major side effects, including psychosis and suicide. And the British ministry is refusing to ban it. Because after all, our good buddies over there manufacturing the drug, they're making money, and that's all that really matters here. And besides, if we're invading another country, we want our troops to be psychotic. By the way, if you've been following the story about the Washington, D.C. Navy Yard shooter, Aaron Alexis, have you noticed that they have completely dropped all mention of the fact that he was on trazodone? Or that he was on any medication at all? They're going on and on about he was stalking the halls with a shotgun and it was sawed off and he had strange messages written on it. And they're basically trying to sell the idea that he was mentally unbalanced, which I think we can all agree with at this point. But they're trying to hide that which probably unbalanced him, which are these prescription psychiatric medications. Now, interestingly enough, and I saw this earlier on Fox News, there is now research showing that some of these antidepressant drugs will cause diabetes in the people that are taking them. Unintended consequences, unlooked for side effects. And this typifies all the research into GMO, and it's really a major problem with the way drugs are developed and marketed in this country, because they'll develop a new product, whether it's a medication or a GMO seed, and they'll test for the desired effect, and then they'll run a really quick test which basically amounts to feeding this stuff to an animal. If the animal doesn't die in 90 days, presume it's safe. And they're never looking for completely unrelated side effects or long-term chronic problems with the drug. I mean, statins have come under a huge attack recently for two reasons. One, they don't actually do what they're supposed to do, and they do have very negative side effects, and statins was one of the medications my youngest brother was on when he died a couple of years ago. And he'd been on a health kick, lost a lot of weight, was hiking 3 days a week, and then he went to the doctor, and the doctor said, oh, your cholesterol's up. Here, have this medication. 2 months later, he suffered a stroke. And they had him on a whole bunch of medications dealing with the stroke, including these statins because he had arterial plaque. And we found 2 of the medications in his medicine chest, which, according to the online resources, should never be prescribed together, and yet they were. And if they're taken together, can produce exactly the lethal symptoms that my youngest brother died from. They're just selling this stuff out there. That's all doctors really are these days in these HMOs and these other institutions. They're just salespeople in white lab coats. You come in and you saw a commercial for a medication, the doctor says, yeah, sure, why not? Had that story we ran the other day about doctors were prescribing MRIs for patients because they were getting financial incentives for prescribing for MRIs. And that's nothing new. When I was very young, long before I met Claire, and I was dating a woman who worked at Queen of the Valley Hospital at the time when they got one of the first CAT scan machines in Southern California. And she actually showed me the memo that had been circulated around. In order to pay for this CAT scan, it must be operating continuously. So at any and all opportunities, you will prescribe CAT scans for your patients. It was all driven by the money. At these large hospitals and HMOs, doctors are evaluated for their continuing position at the establishment, not on the basis of how many people they cure or send home healthy, but how much revenue they generate. It's all driven by the money. More information coming out from Fukushima. Apparently there is a very notable increase in birth defects, miscarriages, all kinds of other symptoms. The Japanese government is trying to keep a lid on it. Of course, they've got the upcoming Tokyo Olympics that they've invested a huge amount of money in preparing for. And if people are all of a sudden aware that there are radiation-induced illnesses all over that part of Japan, people are going to stay home and just watch the Olympics on TV. There's already talk from the International Olympic Committee of maybe changing the venue because of all of this. They sure botched that one up really bad. And I still want someone to go into the ruins of those reactors and recover some of those Siemens industrial controllers and see if there's any data still in those non-volatile memories. Now, those non-volatile memories are exactly the same kind of memory that are used in your little USB flash drives, and those things can last forever. And I think the world needs to know if Stuxnet was inside those Siemens controllers in that nuclear power station, because Stuxnet was written to infect Siemens controllers used in nuclear facilities, targeted on Iran, and it broke free into the world. And we know that when the tsunami hit the Fukushima power station, the safety systems did not function the way they were supposed to. Something was interfering with that. And we need to know that one. Alrighty, let's see, moving on down. Assad fears U.S. aggression. Yes, we already talked about that one, and he has a right to fear it because the U.S. is not concerned about Syria's chemical weapons. They're not concerned about the plight of the Syrian people. These are all wars for the bankers. And they have to conquer Syria so that Syria's resources are sold only for U.S. dollars. They have to conquer Iran for the same reason and to get Iran to accept private central banking. Remember, Syria at this moment is not tangled up with either the World Bank or the IMF. Syria has not borrowed any money from them. Horrors! We can't have a nation that's not in debt to the IMF and the World Bank. Invade them, conquer them, drive them down into debt, force them to accept loans from the bank. That was the entire rationale for the War of 1812. The War of 1812 absolutely was about the Congress refusing to renew the charter of the First Bank of the United States. And the Rothschilds literally threatened the U.S. government. If you do not renew our charter, you will be in a war. And 1 year later, they were in a war because the Rothschild Bank of England offered to fund Britain's reconquest of the colonies for very, very low attractive teaser rates, if you want to call it that. And yes, it's true the United States won the War of 1812, but they were driven so deeply into debt, they were forced to charter the Second Bank of the United States. It's all the money. If you have not seen All Wars or Bankers' Wars or read my original article, you got to hunt that down and look at it, and you got to send it to all your friends and family. Ever since I put that out there, I've gotten all these messages and all these phone calls and all the rest of this stuff that's out there saying, you know, for the first time, American history makes perfect sense. All the wars and the assassinations and the attacks and the bombing, now we understand why that's been going on. We were talking yesterday about how politicians and celebrities like to fake the number of followers they have on Facebook and Twitter as a means of self-promotion. I have 15,000 followers on Facebook. Don't you want to follow me too? And we pointed out how 1/3 of Michelle Obama's Twitter followers are fakes, and most of the remaining ones are not, in fact, actually reading anything she posts. Now we're seeing this article coming out of Ex-Republic TV. Barack Obama is the king of the fake Twitter followers. More than 19.5 million of his Twitter followers do not really exist. They're all manufactured fakes. And there are now companies that will do that. If you're a politician or a celebrity and you're trying to build up your public image, you can feed these people a bunch of money and they will fire up their little bot machines to go out to Twitter and follow you. It's just all a fraud and a scam. They're making a big deal over at Walmart. As you know, we're getting ready for the Halloween season. You know, it's about a month from now. So it's reasonable to start building up for Halloween. What I can't stand is all the Christmas stuff is already in the stores and has been there for months. And apparently Walmart, on top of all of their other abuses of workers and so forth, apparently one of the costumes they have in the store, it's called the Naughty Leopard. And apparently it's been pulled from the shelf because parents were complaining that it seemed to overly sexualize the young girls that were supposed to be wearing it. Now, I've seen a picture of the costume. I don't think it's all that offensive. But I tend to agree with this idea that we shouldn't be encouraging or coercing young people to be anything other than young people. And you probably remember earlier in the week I was talking about this horrible, horrible TV show called Toddlers and Tiaras, about the baby beauty pageants where these frustrated beauty queens who are now mothers, they want to relive the glory days of the pageants, and they take their little girls, 6 and 7 and 8-year-old girls, and they doll them up and put makeup on them and make them look like high fashion models. And looking at these little girls, it's obvious they're not enjoying this, they're not into this, they're being treated like a living doll, a toy by their own mothers. And I think it's a little bit sick. And we were talking about that because France has now passed a law against these baby beauty pageants. Now, if you want to have a beauty pageant for a 6-year-old that looks and acts like a 6-year-old, I'm okay with that. And I'm okay with if little girls want to do this, that's fine as well. But, you know, growing old is a one-way street. You don't get to make a U-turn and come back. And for that reason, I think we should allow children to stay children as long as they possibly can. Hang on to their innocence, hang on to their excitement about the world, and not just have frustrated beauty queen mothers or corporate media trying to say, oh, no, you need to dress sexually and you need to act like you're 18, 19, and 20, and you know, you should want to grow up as quickly as you can. No, you shouldn't. You only get to be a child once. We shouldn't steal that away from our kids in the name of making a fast buck. We're not only robbing our children of their futures with all this runaway, out-of-control government debt, we're stealing their childhood from them as well, for the sake of selling cosmetics and fashion, or reality TV shows. I think by and large, most children in this country are being abused in many subtle ways. I'm not talking about physical abuse, slapping them around. or psychological abuse that destroys their self-confidence and self-esteem. I'm talking about all these other subtle pressures coming from mass media marketing, telling them this is how you should feel, this is how you should believe, this is how you should think, this is what you should want. You should want this year's fashion accessory. And it's dangerous because as adults, we're all experienced enough and cynical enough to see when that TV commercial comes on promoting the new fashion trend, we say, it's just more of the same. We've seen it before. Kids don't have those natural defenses. They're wide open victims to all this mass media marketing manipulation. And I agree with France, it's completely wrong. Completely wrong. Alrighty, let's see. The finger pointing is already going on about out of control spending. And, you know, oh, it's the Republicans, it's the Democrats, it's the Republicans, it's the Democrats. Folks, it's both of them. Both parties are equally guilty of fiscal irresponsibility. It's a systemic problem. It's a bipartisan problem. And arguing over whose neck gets the tallest tree and the shortest rope is counterproductive. Both parties are to blame. They're trying to basically getting us arguing back and forth about who's to blame more, to keep us from standing up and realizing it's the system as a whole that's to blame. They were going on and on, this article out of Investment Watch blog about how there's only been 6 federal budget surplus years since 1960. What they don't mention is that during the Clinton years, President Clinton got his federal budget surplus by looting the Social Security Trust Fund of the cash buildup that was intentionally put in there for the baby boomer retirements. Back in the 1980s, they realized we had this generation of baby boomers who were getting ready to retire. There were fewer younger workers paying into the system, so they raised the Social Security withholding to build up a cash surplus in the Social Security Trust Fund to cover the baby boomer retirements. And Bill Clinton looked at all that money sitting over there in the trust fund and he said, well, we can use that to balance the federal budget and have a surplus. And he borrowed it from Social Security, put a bunch of treasury bonds in there, spent it as general revenue, declared a budget surplus and said, hey, it's the economy, stupid. I did a really good job. And he didn't. He looted the retirement money of the American workers. And the current U.S. government can't redeem those treasury bonds in the Social Security Trust Fund, and that is why they're talking about the crisis in Social Security. We're going to have to cut benefits, or we're going to have to raise taxes, or we're going to have to do both because there's a crisis. But they made this crisis, and they should pay for it. Problem we have with our current system, whether it's Washington, D.C. or Wall Street, when they make a mistake, they expect you to pick up the costs. Show me where in the Constitution the government is allowed to do that. Show me where in the Constitution the government is allowed to take money from the American people to give to private bankers. It's just not in there. We already talked about it. The Greek army is saying that if the president of Greece does not resign by tomorrow, they will take over the government. And that's going to be a spectacular, spectacular situation. Because the new incoming government will be that anti-banker, anti-bailout government that won that first election. And they're just going to write off all the debt and say, yeah, we're in default, deal with it. And that's going to trigger a firestorm of credit default swaps on Wall Street. The only way Wall Street will get out of it is if there's some kind of a force majeure. Oh, there's been a nuclear bomb in the United States. The Syrian, Iranian, Chinese, Korean hackers took down our financial computers. And yeah, they're desperate enough and crooked enough to try something like that. Senator Lee is out there still fighting to defund Obamacare, saying the American people will always have the final word, and he's absolutely right, especially as our patience runs out. Every failed government in history has made the same mistake of thinking they can go on abusing the people, and the people won't do anything about it until finally the people stand up and say, yeah, we're out of patience. Ceausescu, Louis XVI, Mussolini, Charles I, and all those ancient Celtic kings who keep bobbing up in the peat bogs all over England. Now, Paul Craig Roberts is writing an article, and this is following on Seymour Hersh, who basically came out and said that entire raid to get bin Laden was a fraud. Now, Pakistani national TV, and remember, Abbottabad was in Pakistan, and according to the Pakistani media, it was Pakistani troops who first raided that house. And after they were through shooting up the place, somebody said, we think that was Osama bin Laden. And it went up the lines of communication, and the U.S. said, oh, we got to go in there and pretend that we got him. And they send in the SEALs, and they grab the guy, and it's already been leaked to the news, we got bin Laden, we got bin Laden. And then the guys in the helicopter are saying, this isn't bin Laden. And so at that point, they were ordered to just throw the body into the ocean, and all those fake photos showed up. But apparently, Pakistani national TV has come out with their own documentary underscoring the fact that this raid to get bin Laden was another complete fraud and a hoax. How long do you have to be lied to until you are tired of being lied to? Where's that one lie too many? When do you realize that when the government is lying to you as steadily and constantly and unrepentantly as this government, that they obviously have no respect for you as a human being? When are you going to understand that this government sees you as property, as livestock, as chattel, and they treat you just like a rancher treats livestock? You will have this medicine. You're not allowed that medicine. You will eat this food. You will not eat that food. We will watch you all the time. We'll keep records on you just like any other farm livestock. And you have no rights whatsoever. You will go where we tell you to go, feed where we tell you to feed, and then we'll harvest labor off of you, or we'll send you out to fight in wars. That's the attitude of the power bloc, the power elite against the rest of the world. They really do see themselves as a separate species. And that's not a new idea either. Andrew Carnegie openly promoted the idea that the ultra-rich were a separate species of human being who were obviously superior to the rest of humanity by virtue of the fact that they were rich. See that idea pervading the ruling classes. Well, like Henry Kissinger said about soldiers, they're just dumb, stupid pawns to be spent for national policy. He doesn't even see them as human beings. They're just game tokens. People lack any humanity whatsoever. Pakistan is once again reasserting their demand for the United States to stop sending drones into their country and killing a bunch of innocent people. And they're absolutely right. There is no state of war between Pakistan and the United States. The United States has absolutely no legal authority to be sending weapons of war into Pakistan to kill anybody. And for every one terror suspect, and by suspect I mean somebody who's never had their day in court, for which no evidence proving guilt beyond a reasonable doubt has been presented, an average of 50 innocent bystanders get killed. I understand why Pakistan's upset about this. If the U.S. government was sending drones into your town and blowing up 50, 60 people at a time, you'd be a little upset about it too, I imagine. Over at Rolling Stone, Matt Taibbi has another story. And I can't use some of the language that he uses. Well, I guess I can. I'm not actually on the air broadcasting anywhere. But it's another story about how we are seeing all across America the money junkies and governments grabbing the money meant to support the people. They're going after the pension funds, just like George Carlin said they were going to do. They're coming for your retirement. They're coming for your Social Security. They want it all. Now, why are the pension funds in trouble to begin with? Goes back to that 2008 mortgage-backed security fraud, where all those mortgage bundles were rated AAA by Wall Street's pet rating agencies. And that made it legal for pension funds to buy them and invest in them, and a lot of pensions did. And when that whole thing collapsed, they got stuck. Now, this bond buyback program to the tune of $85 billion a month is not buying back all of the fraudulent mortgage-backed bundles. Only the ones that had to be bought back from the other big banks, Credit Suisse, Deutsche Bank. Banks that had the power to actually significantly affect the United States economically. And remember, there was that electronic run on the American banks that had to be stopped. And nobody would say who was doing it. They tried to claim it was anonymous. Nobody knew where it was coming from. That's nonsense. Every electronic transaction has to have a verified sender and receiver before the transaction is allowed to proceed. I think it was a warning shot by those European banks that unless Wall Street made good and bought back those fraudulent mortgage bundles, that they would electronically trigger a run on the American banking system and bring it down. So Wall Street started buying back those failed mortgage-backed bundles, a.k.a. the toxic assets, and the U.S. government passed a law to spend your money to buy those toxic assets off the American banks and dump them on the American people. And that's how they solved the banking crisis. And what we should have done is what Iceland did, start throwing these guys in jail. Carlin had an even better idea regarding the bankers. Crucifixion, upside-down naked crucifixions. Crowd stand around and throw GMO tomatoes at them or something. But Matt Taibbi is out there basically saying the local governments are colluding with Wall Street to take away your pensions. Because nobody in these local, county, state, or even the federal government has the spine to stand up to Wall Street. They all seek higher office, and they all understand if they anger that Federal Reserve and those private central bankers, their political career is over. Who cares about a bunch of old, retired city and county workers? They should do the patriotic thing and go off and die somewhere. Article over at 12160.info. The insurance giants that wrote and lobbied for the Affordable Care Act are already cashing in. We already mentioned this earlier in the week. People on private health insurance plans are getting notices. Their rates are tripling. Their premiums are tripling to be in compliance with Obamacare. Their quality of coverage and service isn't going up, but to be compliant with Obamacare, their rates have to be raised. It's just outright looting of the American people here. Let's see. Article over at Investment Watch blog, why are Americans giving up their citizenship? Well, two reasons primarily I can think of. One is to get away from the double taxation, because if you're an American expatriate living and working in another country and paying taxes there, the U.S. government still expects you to pay taxes here. There's a good reason to write off your citizenship. The other larger one is probably a lot of Americans are just ashamed of being American. They don't want to be remembered as part of the Fourth Reich. And when I've thought about surrendering my American citizenship, and I was presented the opportunity many years ago to become a citizen of another country, and I thought about it long and hard. And the main reason I was leaning towards doing it was I was ashamed to be an American. I was ashamed to tell people I'm from the United States. Especially when you get outside the United States borders and you talk to other people around the world what their opinion of the United States is right now. You'll realize we have lots to be ashamed for. Had another huge meteor fall over the Alberta, Canada. It was seen and photographed all over the place. A lot of stuff falling out of the sky here. And by the way, just to head this off, as usual, we have, Comet Ison is heading in. It's sort of on the far side of the sun right now. If you get up just before sunrise and you look at Mars, Ison is really close to it. If you have a decent-sized amateur telescope, you can see it's already starting to get fuzzy. It is not going to be the comet of the century. It's also not going to be the fizzle. Both the comet of the century and the fizzle were media declarations that weren't actually based on the real data for the comet. It's going to whip around the sun in early November. It might actually come apart. So instead of one big comet in the sky, we may have 3 or 4 little tiny ones flying in formation, which would be kind of an interesting thing to see. But Comet Ison is not Planet X. It is not Nibiru. And it's not going to hit the Earth and destroy us. And I'm seeing all this nonsense being poured out there, probably just to make it look like the internet is a bastion of kooks, nuts, and weirdos, because the government and the corporate media are trying to find some way to discredit the independent media, to lure the public back to the big giant television networks to get their daily dose of lies and propaganda. More revelations about the NSA, that they were targeting critics of the war in Vietnam. And all of this is unconstitutional because it is not a crime in the United States to be opposed to war. And the government, therefore, under that Fourth Amendment, has no business investigating anybody merely for expressing disapproval of the government's policies. That is not a crime. So it's just a reminder, the NSA has been doing this stuff all along. Even before Echelon of the 1980s, even before PRISM and all these data centers. And they're making a big deal in Congress about how they're going to pass a law to rein in the NSA. The NSA has been breaking the law all along. Do you really think they're going to obey this one? Of course not. They're going to pass a law to try and lure you, the American people, back into a false sense of security and privacy, so you will live your lives on your electronic devices and not take steps to protect your business secrets from the government, who are the worst threat to your business secrets of anybody. Anyway. Let's see. More criticism about the CNN's fake translation. And let's see what else we have here. Alrighty, let's go out here and look at this other thing. And I'm sorry to be hemming and hawing, but as I said, I'd planned for a show with so many callers and with a third-hour guest to take most of the third hour. I'm almost at the top of the show anyway. I don't need to find any more stories. I want to wrap up here as we go into Friday. I think anybody who's looking at the situation right now understands that the U.S. government is desperate to get their war back on track. By war, I mean war against the rest of the world. War against any nation that dares sell their natural resources for currencies other than the dollar. War on any nation that is conducting commerce and trade without going through the dollar. And they're dealing with a population of the public that are looking for reasons not to trust the official story. And they're finding them. And now the old model, up until this point, they were trying to run World War III as kind of this very subtle, we'll make up a lie, attack this nation, wait a couple of months till everybody calms down, then we'll make up another lie about this other nation, we'll invade them, then we'll wait a couple of months and let things calm down. They're now understanding they can't do that anymore. They have to go for it all. Syria, Iran, Africa, they're going to have to go for it all. And the only way they stand a chance of selling that kind of a global war to the American people is with a new big bang, whether it's a nuclear bomb somewhere in the United States blamed on Iran, whether it is a staged biological attack in multiple cities so that everybody feels the threat is close to them, whether it's the virtual 911 to smash all the financial computers and say, hey, force majeure, we're off the hook for the debts. We don't have to pay those credit default swaps. Could even be a combination of all three. But there's no question in my mind, with all of the media hype regarding what we now know was certainly an amplified and staged attack on that Kenyan mall. They're definitely planning something new and big, and we have to be on guard against it. And the very best thing that you can do is to share your concerns about a false flag staged by the U.S. government to restart the wars with everybody that you know. Because if we have 200, 300 million Americans expecting the government to stage a false flag, they're going to call it off. Because they will doubt, they will know that the official story will not be accepted. Okay, we're at the top of the show here, and obviously RBN has got some major, major problems, and hopefully we'll be back here on RBN and Bambuser on Monday. And apparently the new professional service on Bambuser is working. I got it working on the web interface. I got an email back from support that the Flash Media encoder I was using will work if I download a new plugin, blah, 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 which I'll do over the weekend. So we'll be back Monday, and I guess this is the end of the show, and Aloha America.